And now, Focus on the Pines with your host, Jack Barnes.
Hi, my name is Jack Barnes, and I welcome you to Focus on the Pines, where we bring you interesting people in and around Ocean Pines. It wasn't that long ago, 1968, that Andrea and I were over at the Gateway Hotel with my parents and our then 1.5-year-old son. And in the lobby, there was a poster, and the poster said, "See the new Boise Cascade development." And we took the Amy Ross Ferry, which had a landing right where the Secrets, near Secrets, where the overflow lot is for the beach club now. And we went over to the Swim and Racket Club, and salesman met us there, put us in his car with the two-way radios, and commenced to show my parents these lots. And Andrew and I kind of in the background, looking at these signs that said future home of the yacht club, and salesman's telling us about this expressway that's going to come through there. And we're just shaking our head. My parents ended up buying 2 lots for, I think, $4,900 each. And little did we realize that our young son was seeing the beginning of a really dynamic community. And it gave me the thought that we should get some of these Ocean Pines pioneers from the original days together and just have a little talk about what it was like then, because there's nothing more interesting in the early days of Ocean Pines, how lots were sold and how Ocean Pines developed. First, before we do that, I just wanted to give you a little history, a little background. And most of the land that became Ocean Pines was originally a land grant. It was a land grant from Lord Baltimore in 1683. And in 1711, the Mumford family owned what was called Buckland Plantation. And in the 1800s, that plantation consisted of 3 mansions. Buckland, which was located where the present-day Whitehorse Park is, which is close to where we are here in the administration building. Malvern, which is near the 15th fairway on the golf course. And Middle Farm in the Mumford's Land area, Mumford's Landing, which explains where our yacht club in Mumford's Landing got its name. The location down here was really excellent for second home communities, and they became very popular in the mid-60s. And that was something that was not overlooked by the U.S. Land Company that was out of Chicago. They were the largest developer of water resort properties in the country and a subsidiary of Boise Cascade, which is a name we hear so often around Ocean Pines. In May of '68, it was reported that 3,500 acres for what was to become a lot of Ocean Pines were initially optioned by Maryland Marine Properties, a subsidiary of U.S. Land. Thus began the beginning of our community, and why I've gathered together for an informal discussion a few of what I call these early Ocean Pines pioneers, individuals who were here at the beginning or played an important part in its history. Now, let me introduce them to you before we hear from them. On my right is Marlene Ott, now a successful realtor. At the time, as she said, a professional mom who helped start Showell Elementary School PTA and was the first Ocean Pines Easter Bunny. I hope I'm not embarrassing you saying that.
No, not at all.
Before beginning her successful career as an Ocean Pines realtor in the 70s. Next to Marlene is Marvin Steen, now a successful developer whose office is still on Ocean Parkway near Turns Landing, and a developer of Wood Duck 1 and 2 involved with Harbor Village and Saltgrass Cove, among other projects in Ocean Pines. However, in 1969, he was hired as a young salesman working for Boise Cascade, and it's a long way from where he went now, but you can see he became very successful. And then, get my other note. There we are. On my left is John Talbot, now also a successful realtor. John was with Boise Cascade from July of '68 to June of 1975 in the reference sale of properties, which I don't quite understand, but he's going to explain that to us shortly. Next to John is Jim Facin. Now, Jim at the time was a Silver Springs resident, at the time meaning in 1968, who succumbed to those high-pressure sales tactics and, you know, what we all hear about and all the hoopla by buying a lot in the very first year it opened. Jim has a lot. I think he's a photographic memory, a lot of history in Ocean Pines. So you've heard enough from me. Why don't we get started? And we're going to do this sort of as an informal discussion. And I'll start with you, John Talbot. You listed yourself as a reference salesman. I'm not quite sure what that is, so maybe explain that and give us a little bit of thoughts of what was going on. And let me say as we go through this, anybody else can jump in. We're going to do it like that and see how things go. John?
Well, your first email requested that we give you a one-sentence scenario of our early days affiliated with the community of Ocean Pines. So I put in there that I was associated with reference sales, meaning of or pertaining to sales. That's what that meant.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And earlier we were discussing the opening day when actually the first day of sales did occur, and I remember that very well. It was Friday, July the 12th, 1968. It was an overcast day. It was warm. There was a large crowd there consisting mainly of the salespeople and the sales manager, Bill Gibbs, and Joe Detweiler, the assistant sales manager. And we were introduced to John Howard Burbage, the then mayor of Berlin, and I believe he became one of the first owners. There was a deal, I believe, where the Amy Ross was a ship, little paddle wheel, miniature paddle wheel, Mississippi steamer type, that he, I think, owned or had affiliation with, and there might have been a trade where he got the lot and we got the boat to use, or whatever the case may be. But that was opening day.
There was another boat too, wasn't there?
No, there was a double-decker red
There
bus.
was a London
Was there a
bus.
Chris Craft?
There was a Chris Craft that Tuffy Mumford used to
Okay.
operate.
All right.
That was his.
Yeah, that was owned by Tuffy.
Oh, is that his?
Yeah, that was his.
That was his. Well, I know it, they used to keep it up at, down the street from our house on Widow's Watch Court when they
That was
built
Tuffy's.
that house there, when I think it was, Schaub was.
Jerry Schaub.
Jerry Schaub.
Jerry Schaub was the manager,
Yep.
yeah. John, where was that opening ceremony? Was it on the property? Was it
It would
over
be-
at
it
the
would- it
sales office in Ocean City?
No, it was in section 1, where you go down Windjammer toward the water
Yeah.
in one of the cul-de-sacs, and they had some tents that they put up in the early days. This was when they were cutting out the canals.
Is
Actually
that
digging
where,
out the canals.
is that where the trailers were later?
No, not, when you say the trailers, there was a trailer at the south gate.
Sales trailers were at
That was at the
south
south gate.
Well, wasn't there a trailer also or something at the swim and racket club? So when they brought people across from the beach, they could bring them into some sort of sales office that was right
gate.
there?
It was the roundhouse.
Yeah, the
That's on
so-called
corner
roundhouse
of
across the street from
Clifford
that.
and,
That was actually later. They used a farmhouse, an abandoned farmhouse in section 1, and that was where we would meet the people. They actually had an airplane. I have pictures of the plane. They would fly them down from Wilmington, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, even as far away as Charleston, West Virginia. And then we would meet the people. They would bring them in on the bus or cars from the airport.
I heard rumors they picked them up in limos.
There were limos, yeah, stretch rail limos, but mainly cars. And then later, the bus that Marlene mentioned, it was an actual bus from England, double-decker. I have pictures of that. And they would use that to take people around. And when they were doing so, there would be a commentator who would explain a little bit about why you're here, folks, as we drive around. And there'll be people that will meet and greet you and show you in detail what we have to offer.
If I remember correctly, that bus got stopped because the people in Ocean City complained about the noise, because I think it went out of 49th Street,
could be.
and they complained, and that was the end of the
I
bus.
don't think it was noisy, though.
No,
No, it was not noisy
No,
any more than a
It
bus.
was that English diesel, it was kind
Now,
It was a
John,
good bus.
I remember the red and white striped tent at the north gate, right back behind the Shannon Crosby's, right on Dawn Isle. Remember, that was a
Yes,
big parking
that
lot.
was where-
That's where the staging area.
That's
called
where
that-
Bob was brought in there because,
Right.
remember Miss M?
Right.
They take her in
Mrs.
the
M,
trailer and
Miss-
give you a
right.
coffee.
And M, the gentleman.
Miss who?
Miss M.
Who's Miss M?
Well, Mrs. M, okay.
Mrs. M. She cooked
We
hot
don't know
dogs.
that she could, yes.
The gentleman who controlled what we call, let's assume this is the trailer, the up trailer. The
Yep.
salesman would drive in, would park here, would come over, this would be a standard trailer.
Yep.
And the gentleman that controlled who went out with who, the rotation, his name was M. Emerson Smoot.
That's
But
it.
we called him M.
M.
And Mrs. M would cook, we'd have Friday cookouts.
Yep.
Where she would do hot dogs, hamburgers, things of
Every
that
week.
nature. And that was at the pig farm,
Yeah.
which today is the large, attractive lake at the South Gate entrance.
Yep.
I can never remember where that was.
Is that where it
That was
was?
a wild
Yeah,
time.
that's-
Darn, I missed out on that. I never got any
Well, that
hot
was
dog
our-
or hamburger.
Now, this was for the salespeople.
Oh,
It would
that's
be-
for the salespeople.
It would be late
Right.
Friday afternoon, we'd get together, again, this is where
Yeah.
the lake is. There was an old
Oh,
deserted pig
I
farm.
always had it north of the North Gate, so
No.
it was actually where the lake, no wonder I
that
can't
was
figure out,
the
it's where the
real
lake
pig farm.
was.
That,
Yeah.
that was
Rabbit
where the
Nose
lake is
property.
today, and that was really where we would hold the parties.
Yep.
Now, prior to that, we would hold the parties at the Seascape Motel in Ocean City. That was back in '68 on Fridays. We'd go there, and then we gravitated over to the site I just mentioned, the lake, and we did that for a while. But that was Emerson Smoot, called M again,
Yep.
and then his wife, Mrs. M, and she was a good cook. She put together,
Right, she could.
yeah.
Now, the
But they,
reason
they
I,
offered food to the people
Yes.
that came,
The people
customers.
and-
Yeah,
and
that is correct.
all
You
of
you
us.
could get sodas and hot dogs or
Right.
whatever, hamburgers. They
Kind of makeshift, but
Big.
that's what we
It
would
worked.
do.
And that's where
Well, they
bacon.
should offer food crepes, they were flying them in for free on planes, right, and busing them in from.
And they were putting
Baltimore
them up in Ocean City free.
and
That's
put them up
correct.
for Ocean City
Free.
free.
Yeah.
In
Free.
the motels, like the Seascape, for
the
instance.
reason I asked about trailers is when we first came to the property in the weekend that included December 7th, 1968. Number one, they put us up at the Quality Inn at 17th Street.
Yep.
You had to agree to come out and to the property. So we came out to the property and got the whole treatment. But in those days, the entrance road was down Beecham Road, and you go straight where the boat ramp is.
Yep.
And wound up on that north leg of Grandport. Well, at about Windjammer Road and Carriage Lane or Sandy Circle, there were a couple of big green trailers, as I recall, and those were the offices.
Yep.
Because there was only one building
Yep.
in the whole property at that time, and that was the so-called roundhouse at the corner of Clipper Court and Harbor View.
Right.
You're
And-
correct. You are correct. There were two green trailers, and that was where Bill Gibbs and
Bill
Joe
Gibbs.
Detweiler would.
That was their office.
headquarters.
Yeah,
And then the agents that were on duty were supposed to hang around that trailer.
Yep.
and get their assignments. Huh?
Again, well, yes, that's correct.
Now tell me about, I keep hearing, I'm not sure I have this right, but let me just set something straight, because when Jim a while back told me about driving down Beecham Road and going to where the boat ramp is and crossing, I'm saying, there was no bridge there. Well, I found out later that there was no bridge there, but there was no
canal there.
That's
because the
correct.
canals had not been dug out.
Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
I brought the early picture. I have aerial picture of what the Ocean Pines, 3,600 acres or whatever it is, before Boise Cascade got in here. And I have an original brochure that says that they had $48 million in developmental costs, land acquisition, and all of the infrastructure that they put in here. And of course, you have to realize that's 1969
That was
values.
68,
Yeah, right.
67
67 values.
$68.
But that's what
That
they
was a big
did.
deal.
And that aerial photo shows
Which
that
we
there
will
was.
show later. We'll
Yeah,
have
right.
that for
That the 9 or 8, 9 or miles of canals were dug, and they created dozens and dozens and dozens of lots, which of course,
Water
they had a permit that ran out December the 31st, 1970.
And at that time,
With the dredging
when
permit?
it ran out, we
72.
had 4 dredges. Remember, John?
Right, and they were
There
bulk
4
heading
up in the
24
creek.
hours. You're
Four
right.
Back to
dredges in the creek.
There were 4. They were trying to get it all done, and they were stopped.
January
On
1,
Oxford.
1973 was, that's
Yeah.
when it
Stop.
stopped.
At
That's it.
Oxford Court, which Oxford has
Yes,
got
that's
bulk
it.
heading in,
Yeah.
but they couldn't dredge it.
I can
That was it.
remember coming across the bridge, like
Oxford
maybe
Court off Boston
after
Drive.
hitting a bar or whatever, at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they would have the heavy equipment with the giant headlights. They were working 24 hours a day because
4.
they knew the
Wow.
date.
Right.
Once that date hit, that was it.
If I
That was
remember
it.
right, wasn't your dad working on one of those dredges?
Yeah, at the end.
Your dad used to
He
be
came down to help.
up in Cape
Yep.
May.
Yep.
Woody, well,
Woody.
that was his name.
My
His dad was Woody. Nice, very nice man.
Yeah.
Didn't they dredge the creek out with a tugboat or something and just when
Oh, they had
tide
four
going
dredges.
out?
Yeah, they had
No,
those big
four
dredges.
Oh, they were regular
They were
dredges.
big, they were
And then
big
they would
outfits.
fill the land. I mean, when they bulkheaded, they created land.
That's,
And
that's
Section
where,
four,
that's where
section
Teal Bay
one.
came from.
That's right.
Wood
Teal
duck
Bay.
alternative, it was all marsh,
That's
hot
all.
water. It was all, they put it
Speaking
in the
of
bulkhead
that-
and filled it back.
Speaking of that, as Marlene indicated, I also have photos of where you have your point lots in Section 4 Teal Bay, as well as Section 1, where it was all marshland.
Yeah.
It was filled in, and today you have the end result.
Yeah, I have two aerials, one
yeah.
that showed before they did it, and then one about a year later, which shows all the
That's
land
a
that
good
they
area.
created.
Yeah.
And
Not bad.
also, when we first started, it took in Teal Bay, you see a lot of houses, the first houses were built on pilings.
Yeah.
It took 7 years for it to settle
Oh, is that
before
right?
we could ever build.
Because it was all filled from
It
the...
was all filled from,
canals.
yeah, they put in the bulkhead first, pumped the sand, muck in back of it, and it took 7 years after that, it was like concrete.
The thing I remember about the dredge is we camped down here in the summer of 69, 70, and 71. And the dredge ran from 8 o'clock Monday morning till midnight Saturday. And midnight Saturday, you'd say, what was that? Because something
Why
had
the
changed.
sound
And
of
then you figure
quiet?
out, darn, they shut off the dredge.
Well, you used to camp in White Horse Park. This is
Exactly.
back there.
Here.
You go back there, you'll still see a pump every once in a while
Yep.
back
Now,
there.
you mean right
water-
here, you
a
don't
water-
mean the White Horse
water
Park.
speed.
No, no, we mean
that
right
is now the
here.
trailer
This was the
park.
Right here.
camping place, and you could tent, and a lot of people had little pop-up RVs or whatever, but there weren't anything.
Pop-up tent trailers.
Yeah,
We had a
right, and, but
pop-up
most of
tent
the people
trailer.
just tented right here in White Horse Park.
Well, when did the
And that's
other
why
White
the
Horse
showers are
Park,
right there.
when did that come about? Wasn't that more Ocean Pines
72.
people that...
Lee,
Uh,
Lee Williams.
Was that
Lee Williams bought
72?
it.
Yeah, he and his dad.
Lee Williams. Lee-
Yeah, and his
yeah.
dad bought that.
He
and
bought
developed
it.
that.
Who bought it?
Actually,
Lee
but
Williams
Boise-
and his dad.
But
Wasn't that
didn't
for-
Boise buy it and then sell it to Lee Williams?
Yes.
Because they bought it to
Yes.
move the trailers
Right.
out
That's
and
it.
the camping thing out.
Yeah.
of
Got it here
Ocean
because
Well-
we're getting too much of it.
That's
Yep.
why they got water sewer, because it was all part of Ocean
Yeah.
Pines.
Ocean
at
Pines.
one
What we were told was that they discovered or invented or passed a zoning ordinance that wouldn't permit people to camp that close to permanent homes. And so in the
Yeah.
summer of 72, we could no longer camp there. For that summer, they paid the rent for us down at the Endless Summer, the campground at Frontier Town. And that's when I remember that this other parcel known as White Horse Park now got going. And they had a boat storage area over there
Still do.
and
And a boat ramp.
a boat
It's a
ramp.
nice area.
That was a
And,
beautiful
uh,
little campground. And a pool.
Oh, yeah, it's all
And a
there.
shower,
Yeah.
a laundry.
And piers, oh, well.
Right, yeah.
Now, back up for a minute, because this is always a big thing. Tell me about, were there certain cars that salesmen had to have? What was the deal with these
It was the
cars?
Mercury Marquis station wagons.
I
and
bought
they all
one,
had-
John bought one with
Well, we-
Dixie pole.
And they all had vanity tags.
There were
It's-
like 20, there were 20 of them, and each, as Marlene just ended, they had OP1, OP2, OP3.
Oh, really? I
It was
forgot that part.
I remember I had OP11, and I think another one. But anyway, we weren't forced, but we were told we would lease them from Massey down in.
That's it.
Yeah, Massey.
Carlton,
So
Massey.
Carlton,
each
Massey.
salesman, each salesperson had the Mercury Marquis station wagon with
Same
a tag
color,
on the
same-
back,
Oh,
OP,
no.
whatever it
Brown,
was. Yeah.
yes.
All brown.
Brown.
Yeah.
Now, what I recall is that a mix of caddies, and our
be-
salesman had a Buick Electra 225.
That
The
was,
beginning-
that was early.
That was in the
early.
beginning up until the
You
time.
had
they-
drones.
yeah.
Oh, okay, early, and then later they standardized.
Right.
That's
Everybody-
Jerry Shop said, we got some cars coming.
And they had these Motorola radios in,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Oh, gosh,
Right.
yeah.
Lou Baker was
Oh, yeah.
bass.
And Marlene, tell us about, you were saying about the codes that were used. When
Oh, yeah.
Somebody tell the viewers
Well,
about that.
all the salesmen had a code, and if you said, I'm 1020, or whatever the code was, then everybody in the salesmen who were all listening to all of this, because they had their CBs on, would know that somebody was out with real good buyers. And then they would say, they would call in, they'd say, I'm just checking in to see if lot 27 in section 7 is still available, because I'm going to go check it out. And that would mean, that was a signal for all of the salesmen who weren't with people to get in the cars, and then they'd come by, pick up me and my 2 daughters, and
Called a
we
push.
we've called a push, that's right. And we would be, Marvin would be my husband,
Yeah.
and we would be a family with another in somebody else's car. And then we would, that's right, we would get out there and we would walk the lot. And then the people would say in the back seat, what are those people doing on our lot? And as soon as they said our lot, the
Bam.
salesman would say,
Gotcha.
mark that lot.
Let me hitchhike on what you just said. The actual phrase that was used.
I knew you'd
because of-
remember.
Let's say you would call and say, this is Unit 17, checking is lot 123 available in Section 1. And then the base would come back and say, yes, it is. They would always say, do you want that lot?
Do you want that lot?
I'll call you back. Now, if I felt I had somebody who was really interested, I would request a push, and here's the terminology we would use. This is Unit 17 calling in. Is lot 123 still on the market? Quote unquote, still on the market.
Right.
That was the signal where Marvin would
Delay
get,
on the push, huh?
Right.
yeah,
And you-
and
yep.
the couple would come out and say, oh my gosh, here comes Marvin with a couple, and he knows that this is one of the best lots there is presently available. Here comes Frank. Look, you like this lot. Do you want these guys to sell the lot that you really? And then that way we would.
It worked.
And they actually settled on the lot the same day that they made the decision. They walked through.
Owner financing.
That's right, owner financing. They would take a credit card, $500 down or
Yep.
whatever, and you'd walk out with the deed at the other end of the.
Signed by
There
Ray
was
Coates.
a
Ray
woman who
Coates.
worked there. We called her. I forget her name. Becky, or she was
No,
very.
Bonnie was.
No, I'm talking about the
Oh, the girl.
the overweight woman who everybody was afraid. These guys,
Oh, yeah.
some of these guys were 6'4", but this woman was so demanding, and
Get it right.
you wanted to. Here's the paperwork, and if she asked you a question, it was yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, because she was a terror. I can see her, but I forget her name. But everybody was afraid of her, and that's who you would give the contract
Case
to.
processing.
They would process it, called case processing.
Right.
They would process it, then the people would get their stuff in the mail to make their payments and all that, and
Right.
that was it.
In other words, the settlement, you didn't go to an attorney. Ray Coates, all the paperwork was done here. He never showed up. The deed, everything was signed, credit card, check, whatever you got, get the money. That was it. The next thing they got is the payment book.
Well,
Yeah.
we lived through that whole schmear on
Yeah.
Sunday afternoon back in December of '68, and there was a lot we liked very much, which I'll tell you, we later wound up buying. But I had read in the Washington Post an ad for a lot up on Cedar Neck Road in Ocean View, and I wanted to go look at it. So we split, and I said, I told the salesman, we'll come back. And then I remember stopping we ran out of time, stopping at a payphone and calling him up and said, well, we can't do it, but I'll be in touch. What I really wanted to do was check out this outfit, which I did. I talked to my bank, Suburban Trust. He said they get top dollar, but they do what they say. And
They did.
they had done Lake of the Woods west of
Right.
Fredericksburg, and they'd used the same radio car technique, but with
Same thing.
Jeeps.
Right.
And I'd read an article about that in the Washington Post. The other thing is, I was looking for better financing. Well, I couldn't find it. They said they had commitments from Maryland National Bank for 7% interest for all of the land in Ocean Pines. Now this, I don't remember what the home rate was, or for an improved lot. A banker would regard these pieces of property as unimproved lots, and 7% was better than if I walked in to finance a house. Now 7%, how can they do that? 7% of what? 7% of twice what it's worth. They
Yeah,
quote,
actually,
bought
we were-
down the rate.
Right. Well, the financing was 10% down, 10% interest, 10 years.
Yeah.
And it was like $69 a month.
Yep.
That's what we advertised.
Yeah,
Because
the
ones
paper,
were
the
4 or
paper
5.
actually wound up in the hands of some financial institution in Palo Alto, California, as I
Right.
recall.
And what were the lot prices,
That was the
John, you
head,
mentioned?
that you just mentioned, that was the headquarters, was Palo Alto.
Yeah.
What had,
Oh, is that right?
For
Boise Cascade. That was
on-
their headquarters.
On the
Okay.
monetary end of the business,
Yeah.
to hitchhike on what you said, Lake of the Woods, I got my first taste of working for U.S. Land at Crown Point, Indiana in 1966, 2 years prior to coming here. They developed a beautiful community called Lakes of the Four Seasons. And I worked for them, and a lot of the people that I worked with in 66 came to Ocean Pines in 68.
really?
And then
Yes.
prior to that, they did
They
do Lake
called-
of the Woods.
Right, they called you guys
Was it
lot
prior to
lizards.
that, or,
Yeah.
or after that?
Actually, Lake of the Woods, a lot of the guys left from the Pines to go down and work at Lake of the Woods. So Lake of the Woods started, I think, in around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Marlene, what'd you say they called them?
they called them lot lizards. Because they were
dirt-
like nomads,
dirt
wherever
peddle-
the
yeah.
next project
Dirt
was. they would-
peddlers,
yeah,
dirt peddlers,
dirt-
lot lizards.
Yeah,
Dirt peddlers?
dirt peddlers, right.
I will say this, that of all the developments that Boise Cascade had, about 35, the queen of the fleet, if you will, was Ocean Pines. I did visit one out Lake Arrowhead. Remember Lake Arrowhead in California? That was a Boise Cascade
Right.
development.
Whatever.
Very nice.
Right.
But the one that shone above all the others was right here.
Right.
Yeah.
And they used to take some of the money that they were making on the plus side in the red and apply it to some of the developments that were in the black. Or do I have that right? Black is good.
Right.
Black and
black
put
is-
it in the red.
Yeah, put it in-
And-
yeah.
Black and put it.
The plus side went to the minus sides and some of the other developments.
Balance them all.
Yeah.
This was the queen of the fleet.
And they also in here, they accumulated probably, and John can confirm it, the best salesman probably in the United States.
that right?
There were
Absolutely.
35 of them.
Well-
They were the best above all.
You were one of them. Now, you're not saying that.
I'm
Mark,
not
'cause
saying
you're one of them.
myself, but I'm saying John is, okay?
Well-
But they had about 35 of them, they accumulated, like John
lot
said.
less- there's
from
lot
This
less,
place
huh?
and that guy, I mean, these guys were,
Dirt sales.
Let me,
They were good.
if I may, I'll tell you,
They were good.
the training and the way that people such as Marlene, this gentleman and myself operate, and Marvin knows this, it's altogether different today than
Oh,
it
yeah.
was. There was no sophistication. We were trained to, let's say we got a couple, okay, Mr. and Mrs. John Jones, okay, and we put them in our car. We were told to spend about 20 minutes with them and find out as to whether or not they have any interest. If they don't, you take them back so you can get somebody else. We were told to ask them to buy. And when they said, I'm going to think about it, then you just, that's when the...
go home.
that
Well,
right?
no, that's when the match of the wits would begin. I mean, and Marlene could do the same thing. I could center people and back them into a corner verbally and prove to them that they don't really have to think it over. I'd show them why, but whatever, they,
Well,
It was, they really had a lot of sales techniques or and
Yes.
training.
Yes.
You know, they did. They trained the salesmen, because not a lot of the ones that came, actually Dick's brother Dave was a 3M salesman, and they
Yeah.
recruited a lot of those guys that sold other products.
right.
And then they
And
trained
trained
them.
them.
That's what Dick came out of the United States Navy.
Yeah.
And his brother said. you
Who's
know,
this Dick?
my Dick,
Okay.
Dick Ott came,
Yeah.
you know, in 1969 when he got out of the Navy. There weren't too many calls to driving destroyers around, so he didn't have a job. And so his brother was selling land here for Boise Cascade, and he said, "Come on down. We got lots of jobs, and they'll train you." And
Yeah.
I mean, they just had all kinds of
Was it
training.
you that told me that the salesman had a place up on Windjammer that they could stay overnight if they wanted to? Called the, I don't want to say what you called
No,
it.
the pig farm.
no, actually, there was no
No
place
place.
in here. There was on the corner of Fifth Street and Boardwalk, there was a house right facing the ocean. In fact, when I first came into town, that's where I stayed, right on the boardwalk. That was owned, it was rented out from, I think, Burbage or somebody, I don't know, but Boise Cascade rented that, and the salespeople were coming into town. That's where we stayed.
Well, you have to realize that Ocean City was not a year-round community. They literally rolled up the
Yeah.
sidewalks
They
on
did,
Labor Day.
yeah.
And, what lights there were went on orange blinking.
Yeah.
And there weren't any motels. The Ebb Tide or whatever it was on Route 50 was one of the only year-round places.
The Alamo was there.
Yeah, the Alamo, right,
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. But it was
But-
just,
and there was no Route 90 bridge.
No,
It
that's
certainly
right.
wasn't.
We had to
Yeah.
drive.
I forgot that.
Apropos of the salesman and your training, I'll finish up my little story. I wound up buying a lot. I called the salesman. Our guy worked Silver Spring in the Washington suburbs in the week and then came down to quote
A lot of
property
John Fager, a
unquote
lot of
on the weekend.
hospitals.
So I called him up and said, yeah, we want to buy the lot. And I signed the contract in room 225, the old executive office building, which was my office, on the 13th of December, 1968. And Don, our salesman was a man named Don Girolamo.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know.
yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, you all
Short
remember
guy,
Don.
short guy.
And
Yeah.
I know.
he said, they tell us if we let a prospect get off the property, we'll never see him again.
That's right.
I
Well,
said,
that's-
well,
that was right.
they're wrong in this case.
Well,
You
the
mentioned
feedback-
John Fager. Was he a
feedbacks-
salesman?
Well,
No,
John,
he-
John, there's a lot of John, Jimmy Moscow, Jimmy Spore.
What they call run
Well, they worked
leads.
up in
Yes.
Baltimore and so they call people during the week.
in a place called a boiler room.
This is a Fager's Island, John Fager we're
Yeah,
talking
John-
about.
yeah.
This was
All
people
of
that
it.
just had a reverse cross directory that said on Elm Street, we're gonna call house number 101, 102, 103, 104.
Well-
And then the salesperson, Marty Groff was one too.
Sure.
He was an English teacher.
Yeah.
And at night, he used to run leads for Boise Cascade. And every person that they brought down, they got paid something.
Well, here's
$20 bucks.
Here's how that worked. Because I used to run leads. I ran leads in Baltimore, Washington, Wilmington.
Yeah.
They would get, like, say I drove up to Wilmington, and you were in charge of the office. You would give me the 3 leads I would have that night. I would go meet the people. They knew somebody would be coming or knock on the door. They invite me in. I would explain to them what the situation was. I would ask them for a $5 bill.
Bill, that's right, which you
Which you,
stapled.
which you staple to the sheet, and then you will get that $5 bill back when you come down. We'll have a luau,
Yep.
and then you'll go over and take a tour. So it didn't cost them anything, but they had to give $5, which in
to get
today's
their-
money would be $25 or $30.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so that-
They
did-
got
came to
'em-
get their money back. That was a very.
Stiffened their
Boise
resolve,
Cascade
as it were.
Technique, because people would say, yeah, we're coming, but they never came.
Oh, was that you,
But they would
Marlene,
come
that
to
was
come.
talking about the luau's?
Yes.
What, tell us, what was it? I mean, I can imagine what it was, but what was it really?
Well, it was really a chance to pitch the.
It was-
How many
the
people would
community.
come to a luau?
Oh, the salesmen would all come.
I know that.
We were required to come. We had to wear Hawaiian shirts
Shirts.
and white pants.
Right.
And they put a lei around our neck.
Right.
The beach bunnies, the girls in the bikinis, would roam the beach during the day. You're on your
Give 'em a
beach
free
towel with
ticket.
your
Right.
wife.
With
How would you like to come to a luau, Hawaiian
Free.
luau tonight? Free, no obligation. Please help me out. I'm in college.
This is at the
and I-
beach club, right?
Yeah,
That's very
beach
good,
club,
yes.
Yep.
So you would end up, and there would be a table of maybe 3 or 4 couples, and I would be seated at this table, she would be seated at that table, he would be seated at
Right.
We would talk, general talk, where are you from, this, that, what do you do? And then you would talk about Ocean Pines, and you would line up a time when they could come over tomorrow, so to speak, and take a tour. And
And
then
right
they get their
there-
$5 back.
At the Beach Club parking lot, there was a rotunda, which was a Kingsbury home, and that's where they would greet the people.
Yeah.
Now that.
Yeah, I remember that.
They needed more parking place, so they moved that, and I wanted to bring it here for the
That moved to
recreation.
Delaware.
It's in Delaware.
Larry's home.
Yes.
It's Larry's home.
Larry-
On
Larry's home in
113.
Millsboro.
And
I
that's
bought
right.
it.
You bought it.
I bought it.
There you go.
I bought it and moved it.
Yeah.
Why
You
did
did?
you move to
I
Delaware?
bought it and moved it. I own that property where Larry's Homes is up there. I moved it up there.
Oh,
I did
Larry's
not
homes
know
in
that.
Delaware.
Yeah.
Larry's
Yeah,
Homes up in
Millsboro.
Milford, Delaware.
And
It's right on the
that's
highway.
It's still
It's
there.
still there,
Yes.
and I finished it all off.
Yeah.
Right.
And finished it total off, and I was going to open an office,
Right.
and they came to me and offered me a lot of money. I said, "It's all yours. Buy the property house." So I sold it all.
So that was right on
On the highway. It's
Ocean
still there.
Highway.
It's still
the end
there.
of the parking lot.
Oh, it's still there.
Right.
They've done very well with it.
It was
But it
right,
was-
it was right here.
There you go, facing
It was
the-
It's on the
right
highway.
there,
Right.
Right there on,
And when they did the parking lot, they
they
moved
just
it.
moved
Yep,
it.
they did parking
We
space.
saw-
And guys, remember the house that was on the ocean?
Oh, yes.
That's where Bill Gibbs and his family stayed Here was what you.
What house was on the ocean?
The house behind, here's the building you just described, where she showed you the picture.
Right.
Okay. And then here's the.
That's the one on the Ocean Highway.
That's correct. Here's the ocean right here. Here's the highway.
Coastal.
Here, there was a house, a 3-story house right on the ocean. That's where Bill Gibbs stayed with his wife and his son.
And that got torn down to put the beach club
They
in?
moved it. They
Oh,
moved it
they
to,
moved
I
it.
know where it is. It's around, 15th Street or something like
something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
Now, who was Bill Gibbs again?
He was the
boss.
sales manager
Sale-
of Ocean
Yeah.
Pines.
Okay.
And Joe Detweiler was the assistant.
Now, what was Wesley Butler?
Wesley T. Butler was the
Excuse
Yeah.
me.
project manager, something like that.
Yeah.
And he decided that Ocean Pines was so great that he would do one down in Virginia. And he went and did Captain's Cove, but it never got
Early,
off the ground.
early days, it didn't work.
Yeah, that's
Still
right.
has-
Cal Burns and all that crowd all the way down there.
Right.
Boys coming down here, lucky we didn't.
Now, aside from these luau's, I mean, tell me a little bit about, I mean, there was a lot of like stars that were involved bringing down here to
Oh,
get,
yeah.
like Tom
Well,
Maddy,
Tom
I heard.
Maddy,
Tom,
The
they
halfback.
basically built him a house free.
Wait, yeah, well, he built a couple of houses, he and his brother. One
Yeah.
was on the corner of Seabreeze and
Yep.
And I
Grandport.
heard in July, he'd like sign all these autographs for people.
Yeah, and we had Billy Casper, of course, was the traveling pro.
Yeah.
And he had clinics, and he'd come to the Ocean Pines golf
Golf
course
clubs,
and do demonstrations. And they actually gave him a Border Links condominium. Number one, I think, was Billy Casper's unit. And you would see, if at the time, you would see Billy Casper, traveling pro for Ocean Pines.
I don't know that it was number one. It was the one that the Haleys had.
Yeah, okay.
It was
Yeah.
further up, but,
One or
speaking
two or
of
six.
Boise Cascade, I still wear, Bobby Ott has 2 of these.
Yeah.
This was a watch that was presented, not just to me, but I was just one of a group. We had sold, back then it says, John Talbot, Boise Cascade Properties, Inc., $500,000 club, because all you could do then was sell lots. And
But at $5,000
That's
a
a
lot.
lot.
That was a-
That's a
that's
lot.
a lot of
That's a lot
lots.
of
Heck of
lots.
a
this
lot.
watch is a good, I had it appraised through Treasure Chest in Berlin. They said it was worth about $1,000 because
Oh,
it
yeah.
was gold, and that sucker still works good.
They,
But Boise
Boise-
was pretty good about giving
Boise-
promotions
Oh,
to
they-
salespeople.
Oh,
and-
they promoted.
They used to put money on the lots.
They had-
used to
they'd
put a
have a-
$500 bill, a $100
underneath your
bill.
chair.
Yeah.
What
They
Marlene
say-
said, it was called a SPIFF,
A
spiff.
spiff.
A spiff
If I
on the
sold,
lot.
if I
That's
sold
right.
this lot
That's right.
that day, I got a minimal $200
2 to
spiff.
5.
They were paying 20% commission. That's what
Yeah.
the commission was.
They-
Well,
Not
that
bad.
maybe for the guys, but ours on the line was 10%.
10%. okay.
10% on the line,
Yeah.
yeah. But a spiff was an award, if you will, or a bonus, and it was usually 200.
Yeah.
And then remember the days of the shoppers?
Oh, yes.
The shoppers, Boise would hire people to come down and monitor what the salespeople were saying, to
They
make sure
did.
they weren't lying.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
Okay.
if
Oh,
you-
yeah.
If you got a good report.
Quality
they would-
control, huh?
Yeah. they would-
Internal
time.
affairs.
They would call you up and present you with a spiff.
Yeah.
If you didn't get a good report, they.
They were gone.
No, well, no,
Close.
you were reprimanded,
Yeah,
but,
it
you know.
wasn't, it
Clean
wasn't
up
good.
drag.
But the irony of it is, some of the people they hired gave it away. Because I had a guy once who had a bandage around his arm, and he asked questions that were a dead giveaway. And then his tape ran out, so he says, "Could we stop? I got to go to the restroom." Well, he went in and changed his tape. Yeah,
So
and then another person, they weren't trained too well, because they would ask outwardly
Yeah.
questions pertaining to a topic that you couldn't talk about. So you knew you were being shopped.
Yeah.
That's why I always got to
Race color,
I only
spell.
had one. I had
National
one. I
origin,
had
you
one.
know, right. Mhm.
Huh.
Another thing, as far as the golf course, what happened, the golf course can never make money. And they wouldn't do anything. And you remember they walked into a meeting one Saturday morning and said, "Boys, I'll tell you, here's the deal. The first, what did we get, 100 lots to sell? And we had to go to Salisbury, to the other golf places, and give them a 10-year free membership. You remember
Oh,
that?
the membership lots. I
Membership
remember
lots,
those,
oh,
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
100 of them.
They were
I
very
also
good.
read that the golf course in the winter, they sold hunting packages with blinds, decoys, the whole thing.
Yeah, but most of that, we used
No.
it for ourselves.
No, wait a minute, there was no hunting on Ocean Pines. Is that what you mean?
Well, I just read that in Bug Wagner's book that they had sold hunting packages. They didn't say where they were hunting.
Maybe
They
down
were
the end of Gunpoint Road. or
They were
something.
outside.
Yeah, well, it's been outside.
I will say
Outside.
this, what today is Turns Landing. In the early days, I used to take my 22,
Yeah.
and I'm serious, I'd go target shooting in what is today Turns Landing.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yep.
and then I live on the 15th hole of the golf course, the inner links. We had a herd of anywhere from 20 to 25 deer
Oh, yeah.
that used to live in there before they developed it. And they used to come down in the morning and drink there at the 16th hole lake. I mean, it was gorgeous. I mean,
Oh,
we
yeah.
had deer running all over the place. But the more it developed,
Oh, yeah.
the flora and the fauna. And of course, obviously they had an Ocean Pines horse stables here.
Where were they? I forgot about the horse stables.
Okay, that is
You're
where
always
the
not
post.
sure where they are.
Well, that's where the post office.
Near where the post office is.
That's
Where
right.
the post office is, not where the electric
Yeah.
And it was a nice place.
Right in there.
It was
It was
nice.
beautiful.
Howard Hall, who still lives here,
Right.
brought
He
it,
went.
built it.
He was running it?
He
My
ran
kids
home.
took riding lessons there.
Yeah. his-
Well, listen,
his
when my
girl.
daughter was 12, I got her a pony, and the horse just died. He was 38 years old. We had just like in the last 5 years, the horse died that we
38?
bought.
God.
That
Really?
We kept at the Ocean Pines stable. Yeah, and they had a wonderful group of kids, a 4-H group.
It was nice.
It was just like, it was a very small community. There was less than 600 houses, I mean, over the first couple of years. I mean,
Gosh, yes.
Colonel King's house was the first one
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Sandy Circle.
Yep.
Or on Cove Lane, rather.
Cove
Yeah.
Lane and
Cove Lane.
burned down.
Wait, that's the
remember?
first house?
To my knowledge, it was
To my
either
knowledge.
that or was it Floretta Fear, didn't she?
No, I think
Loretta had
that
the
was
wall.
first.
Colonel
she
King was
second.
number one? Okay.
Yeah, right.
All
Now, where was Floretta's house?
On Frigate
here.
Run.
Yeah, the end
what?
of the cul-de-sac
Frigate
on
Run.
Frigate Run, end
Oh,
of the
okay.
end of the cul-de-sac.
Oh,
I
that was
can't
the
remember
first,
what I
that
had
was the
for
first
breakfast, but I
house
can
or the first
remember.
resident?
There was a house on the Parkway that was pretty early. They recently tore it down and built a bigger house on the lot. Do you remember that?
On the Parkway.
On the Parkway?
Yeah.
Okay, if you're going away from here, towards the yacht club, whatever direction that is, on the left, right after you pass Newport Drive. That was a very early house, about the time of,
Well, one of the first
yeah.
ones was the Harrison's house on Driftwood. He built a Boise, Cascade, Kingsbury home. He owned Enchanted Forest up in Ellicott City or whatever, and their house is still there on Driftwood. But that was one of the first houses.
And how about the one Marty Groff thought the first one was when you're coming from the North Gate and you're passing Newport, just maybe 4 houses or 5 houses up on the right. They're the ones that are like the Jetson houses, they're big round top with a little pedestal. He thought that was one of the first ones.
Well, Marty lived at, let's say if you're coming down Beecham Road, Beauchamp Road, and you turn in, following?
Yeah,
You
same
turn
one,
right,
same.
up there on the right is where Marty used to live.
Oh, he also lived on the 7th hole of the golf course.
Where, on
It was
St.
in a
Martin's Lane?
Montego. Remember, that's a Kingsbury home model, it was a Montego. But they were very few year-round people. Colonel King was the community manager.
He was first,
ran,
I think.
Yes, he ran his office. It was a house on Windjammer Road. I think it was an Usco modular, and that's Marvin did one of those. But that's where the association office was. And Diane, I don't remember her. She was the secretary, and then Colonel King.
Now, were there
Ran them.
standard, I always thought there were, I used to call them names, like there's one with a big sign on the roof, I call that the restaurant. Then there's a Jetson, that's the one with the pillar in the middle and the big round top. Did Boise have a certain number of just standard?
Now, what happened,
Homes that
that's
were
how I got in.
available.
I came in with Kingsbury Homes. Harvey Hastings, you remember
Harvey
Harvey?
Oh, yeah.
Harvey was the boss, and he said, Marvin,
karate.
you gotta
Yeah.
run this whole Kingsbury
Kickboxing.
Homes.
Right.
They sent me to school, and I came in, that's all I came in and building Kingsbury Homes. And they had about 10 models, and that's what we sold.
The Concord,
years.
the Riviera, the
Sierra, the
Montego,
Sierra.
the Sierra, the
All the first houses.
but Boise also had a string of models, did they not?
They,
No,
well, they
that
owned,
was
Boise
it.
owned Kingsbury.
Oh, they owned
Kingsbury
Kingsbury,
Homes
okay.
And that's
is
what
a
we
division
sold.
of Boise
And
Cascade.
it finally got to the point that Harvey came in one day, he said, Marvin, I'm gonna leave. I said, Harvey, when are you leaving? He said,
And
I'm
they
gonna let
are.
them run 2 weeks. I said, well, I'm gonna be very sorry, I'm leaving too.
Right.
And that's when I started building on my own.
When was that?
But they
When you-
taught me, I mean,
Was
they
that in-
they
was
did
that
a
in
great job.
70
They knew
or-
what they were doing.
What year is that, Marvin, that you,
Oh, probably 72,
72.
73, something like that.
so you had worked for Kingsbury from 69?
That's how I got in here.
That's how you got in here,
That's how I got in here.
okay.
And John was.
Oh, you weren't
original-
selling lots?
No, I was selling houses.
Yeah, because
So-
Boise had a division, a housing division.
They did.
It made
Oh,
sense.
yeah.
Indeed.
Buy a lot, build a house.
The
Buy
only
a
one
lot,
I
build a house.
recognize is the Hatteras, that little,
Oh, they had about 10 up.
well, I know,
Oh, yeah,
All the
I've
first
got the
ones-
original, if anybody needs
I'm
some.
sorry,
I
there's
got
also a
them. I got
Wellfleet.
them.
That was next door to our house on
Wellfleet, yeah.
Right.
on
Yeah, all of them.
Widows Watch
Right.
Court. It was a Wellfleet.
Right.
And
And it was very interesting. At the time, there was very few year-round people.
Very few.
Very,
Oh, yeah.
very few. And then there was only probably a dozen, maybe 2 dozen kids. And so we had to make arrangements we said, we got kids in here, we need the school buses. And the county said, oh, you've got a private community. We're not bringing the school buses into your streets.
Place.
You have to take your kids to the truck route.
That's right.
Corner of St. Martin's and Beecham Road. We had a gate there. And then that's where we had to take our kids, and then the school bus would
the
come,
school
pick
bus
up
pick
the
it up
kids,
there.
and then they would go to school. And after that, we went to the attorney, the big Chicago three-piece suit attorney,
Yeah.
that represented the association, which was good. And he went down to the county and stood before the county commissioners and said, let's see, how many $1 million are our taxes that we're contributing? Maybe we should just withhold the taxes until we get bus service. Within 2 months, we had buses
Is that right?
in the Pines, yeah.
And she had a lot to do with that. She was right in the middle of that.
Well,
Well, did the
She had
kids.
two kids she had to get to
Kids
school
all
back
of them.
then.
That's
Had to
right.
get them, you know.
I remember that guard, because my friends and I, when coming in,
Well,
we would try to get
Hastings.
through that gate with, we call it the guard wave, you know?
Oh, you
You'd
had
sort of
to-
wave and keep going, see, and then he'd sort of look and you were through. But how long did that guard last there?
It worked a lot
Long
of
time.
years.
Well, it probably
too long.
until 76, 77 is when
At
they
least.
stopped.
It had something to do with the county roads, right?
Well,
Aside from the
it's
cost.
No, they were paying the boards in.
Well, the reason we protested it was because we could not get VA financing in
That's
Ocean
right.
Pines because they said that we were a private community
Private.
and we can't lend VA money, government money in a private community.
Yep.
So that's when we started protests and
That's
took the gates
probably
down.
the primary, but I remember at the south gate, there was an actual arm gate that went up and down.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And they had somebody, it was so many vehicles would go, it was like a joke.
Back it up.
There would
Just
be
Oh,
a
yeah.
backlog of.
Wear it out.
Because up, down, up, down,
Yeah.
up, down, up, down.
And they did a study and they found out that obviously if you were going to come in, you'd lie to get in the gate, it'd keep honest people out, just like most things. And they just took the gate guard down, and that's when they beefed up the Ocean Pines Police Department.
Yeah.
When we got lots and lots more officers.
But the reputation on account of those gates, that I'm convinced that's why we never had problems in here.
Right. Well, you
People,
told me.
it's the wrong place to steal something in here.
Right.
You gotta
Well, they
go
say
through
it's
the two
because there's
gates.
only
Yeah.
two ways in and
That
It's
is-
out of the way that
Right.
it can be caught too easily. They had a guy on the north gate, and I used to buy my eggs from him, Whitey.
Yeah.
He'd man the gate at night, and I'd buy my eggs from him.
On the early years, you couldn't even find your place to run this place. We would hire a whole truckload of lumber. We never lost a tube before in life.
Yeah.
Now, we heard stories,
We
that
did.
maybe this is a Ocean Pines legend of somebody that stole the appliances out of a house under construction by boat. Was there any truth to
Never
that?
heard
Does
that.
I
anybody
never heard
know?
that one.
No, I would have heard that.
You'd have heard it.
I'd heard that.
You know, that one.
But it was an interesting time because
Yeah.
but there weren't they didn't have anything going on. And I said that my description was I was the first Easter Bunny because I went up to Tim and Mary McMullen and I said, Tim, Mary, what are we doing for Easter? And they looked at me and they said, I don't know, what are you doing for Easter? And I said, I think I'll make a bunny costume and I'll hop around
did
Whitehorse
it.
Park and hire.
Marlene, I have pictures of the bunny, probably of you and the
She
kids.
got right there.
At the house, I have pictures of that, what you're talking about.
Right, yeah.
You may not want those today with Facebook and YouTube.
And actually, then that bunny costume became Gwen Freeman, the drama teacher over at the high schools, took all of the Ocean Pines kids, and for the summer, we did the production of Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, using only Ocean Pines kids for the production. And that costume, I just took the ears that went this way and made ears that went this way, and it was Snoopy. It was the Snoopy costume.
Converted, huh?
Absolutely.
Converted from.
Absolutely.
To cite an example of how the reputation of Boise Cascade helped sell, give you a quick example. There were times, and you guys can remember back in the old days, I'd have a couple, let's say it was Mr. and Mrs. Barnes, and there was an interest per se, let's say in waterfront. So I would take them out to a lot, and here's what we would do. We would get out of the car, there would be a stake here, a stake here, stake here, and a stake here. Now these would be red ribbon, stake about that high, little, you got a red ribbon stake here, red ribbon stake here, and we walk back. And then the trees had been cut down, but the stumps were about this high in the ground. And then over here is the other lot on the other side with a red stake and a red stake. And in the middle is a stake with a blue ribbon. And I would say, now, Mr. and Mrs. Barnes, we're standing here at the edge where there's going to be a bulkhead built. And there will be a bulkhead over there. And you see that stake in the middle with the blue? That's going to be the center of the canal. And you're looking at tree stumps and thinking there's going to be water there. So that the people would buy, not because of me, but because of the reputation of Boise, that they say that they're going to do it. And then we could tell them about some of the other developments that they had.
Right.
Is that why they kept saying, you gotta believe in the
Well, I
early
can tell
days?
you-
You gotta believe.
I can tell you one thing, they delivered.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just
They
going to say,
delivered more than they promised, I'll tell you right now. They
I don't
really
care
did.
how much the salesman used to call it puffing.
Puffy.
Yeah.
Puffing, you know, you puffed. You
But
said
never
this
enough.
is going to happen. I don't care how much puffing the salesman did. Boise did more than what was
They did.
promised.
You know, here you go. All the lies came true.
All the lies came
Yeah.
true. That's right. They did.
Yeah. All the lies.
Quote unquote, all the lies
Yeah.
came true.
Yeah.
They did more than what they really said they were going to do.
Right.
No, I
We're very
remember-
fortunate
Yeah.
to have a developer with deep pockets. That's
Yeah.
for
But
sure.
you know, they did have some salespeople that really did do a lot of puffing. And then
Yeah.
there, I know of some, I won't mention their names, but some of them were let go
Yeah.
All right?
because they didn't tell
Too
the
much.
truth to the extent that they should have. So they,
That speaks well for Boise. really.
Oh, yeah.
Am I correct in remembering that in about, let's say, 74, 75, after the oil crisis of 73, that Ocean Pines was the only unit of Boise Cascade that was profitable?
Probably.
I think that's a safe
You're probably
assumption.
right, yeah.
No, I think, I remember hearing reports to that effect
Well,
from,
remember me earlier saying they would take the Queen
Yeah.
fleet here, they take the money
From here.
and help defray expenses on some of the developments that weren't doing so good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike, and, you know, that's what happened to places like Lake Linganore and,
Right.
you know, they went broke during that crisis period. One of the things that struck me about Boise or U.S. land here in the Pines, they didn't spread themselves too thinly. For example, when they were selling in Section 1, they only sold in Section 1.
Yep.
I don't know what their criterion was, but it was obvious as things moved on that when they had sold X percentage of lots or X percentage of dollars worth in Section 1, then they would move on and finish the rough development of Section 2 and start selling there. And that way, you see, they kept their cash flow going both ways instead of going, you know, instead of developing the whole shebang, borrowing tons of money and going broke.
And didn't every section, I know it did, every section had a name.
Oh, yeah.
Like Section 1, where I live, is, I know
Everybody had-
Newport.
Newport.
They all had
You remember the other ones?
Somerset,
They had a name.
Bainbridge.
No, wait, what's
Teal
Section
Bay,
2 is what?
Somerset,
Somerset. And Section 3,
Bainbridge.
Bainbridge. Section 4,
Teal
Teal
Bay.
Bay.
Teal Bay.
Bay
Section
Colony.
5 is Bay
Bay
Colony.
Six
Colony.
is Huntington.
Huntington
6 is
section.
Huntington, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Bay-
Seven is Bramblewood.
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 Okay, up near
And
the
then-
North Gate.
What's eight? Seabright.
It's way back.
See,
way
right,
back there.
Yeah, the eight is where the graveyard is,
Yeah,
guys.
that's right.
right.
yeah.
H for the graveyard
Is
is.
it Seabright?
It could be.
And there's still.
No,
it's-
Tanglewood.
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 Way
That's
back.
gotta go.
Yeah, way back.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's
Nine
still
is
does anybody know why, I just discovered this the other day, there is still a horse farm back behind where Gillis is putting in by the
Yes.
North Gate, where he's cleared out. If you
Yeah,
go back
that's-
in those woods,
That's Mr. Cathel's farm.
he didn't sell, was that what
That's
happened?
correct, that's
He was
correct.
a holdout.
Yes, he promised his dad that he would never sell that property. That's why they call it Cathedge Road, because that's a combination of Cathel and Burbage. And that's what he
Oh,
had.
Carthage.
Carthage
That's the
Road.
Burbage property.
Yeah.
Yes,
Goes
it's
back in there.
Burbage and Cathell
Yep.
are the two people.
Carthage. I wondered where that name
And
came
there's still horses, you still
Yeah.
have horses
Well, they
back
had
in there.
emus and all kinds of crazy stuff
Oh,
back
yeah?
then, miniature ponies and all
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and they hooked him into Ocean Pines water sewer
Yeah.
because he had a
From that
cesspool.
section, yeah.
Right.
Does, we'll probably wrap this up. Does anybody have anything they'd like to, the back of their mind, they want to throw in while we're thinking about it? We certainly covered a lot of bases.
Well, don't you think it's interesting? I think that we all believe in the community so much that we're all residents here. I mean, we're not just
Yes.
talking about
Yes.
the place.
That's a good point.
Someplace. I mean, the people that are salespeople, we could live anywhere.
It's
But
true.
we don't.
No,
We are very
could live
committed.
where
And
we
I
live.
will say that this gentleman was one of the most generous and most kind people when it came to anything that needed to be done within this community. We could always call
Yeah.
on Marvin. If
Marvin
you
would
ever
step up
needed
to
it,
the plate.
Marvin
Yeah,
would step
I know
up to
that
the
for a
plate.
fact, and you're right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just
Right.
a pillar of the community, has been around for a long, long time.
Well, you're all certainly what we call pioneers, and, it's great being able to share these stories, and I appreciate it. I know that people viewing this appreciate it. I also want to thank Bud Rogner. If you would want
Posthumously.
some detail, History of Ocean Pines,
It's
this
there.
book is available at the library. It's still out there, and you can get a lot more detail. It's really interesting, so pick it up, and thank you, Bud. It helped me put some of this together. And certainly thank John and Jim and Marvin and Marlene for taking the time. And it was really a fun time. We really appreciate it.
fun.
And we're going to
Yeah.
get some pictures of some of the things you brought in to show the viewers as well. But thanks again. I hope you all have enjoyed it. This is Jack Barnes for Focus on the Pines.